welcome everybody. You're in the right place for Hidden Gems in ColdFusion 2023. I'm Charlie Arehart, and I'll be your host for the next 45 minutes. Down, if you guys have noticed, it's only 45 minutes. We got to kick it into gear. We don't get an hour like often. So there's all my contact information. If you have any follow-up questions, want to share any feedback, I'd love feedback. Love to hear from you. All right, so in this presentation, well, that's not going to looking up there is not going to work. I want to point out that some of you may have noticed that Adobe wasn't here, and they were here in spirit with a table, but they weren't here in person, so there was nobody doing a keynote. And so because of that, whereas my Hidden Gems talk would usually be just kind of stuff that you wouldn't hear otherwise about, I've decided to go ahead and expand it, which again, I'm compressed in time. So I'm going to at least cover some of the key new features just so you know about them in case you hadn't heard yet about it. So I'll try to keep it brief, and I'll focus them in developer-oriented features, and then administration, installation, deployment, configuration-oriented stuff. And then, if you hadn't noticed, CF 2023 comes on Java 17, and as does Lucy 6, and by moving to Java 17, there's benefits that come from that for both engines, so I'll chat a bit about that. Then I'll talk about compatibility and migration issues, which concern folks, but the good news is that they're generally very smooth in the case of CF 2023. But I'll talk about if you're coming from older versions as well, and then I'll include things that are often important to people like pricing and standard versus enterprise differences and end of life and stuff like that. And then one of the things that I do with these talks that some people really appreciate is I spell out what are the version numbers of the underlying libraries so that you can know what things have been updated or haven't been updated. And then I'll mention some other stuff, including the new CF Builder for VS Code. If you didn't know, there is ColdFusion Builder for VS Code, and it's free, and it's a very different experience than working with the old CF Builder that was based on Eclipse. But moving on, remember we only got 45 minutes, so got to kick it into gear. All right, so if you didn't hear, CF 2023 was released in last month, May, and I don't think there's as much new in it as past releases. That doesn't mean there's nothing. There's still plenty of things. It's just not as many new things as previous releases. And there's plenty of resources out there, and I'm going to be providing you links to those resources so you can just look into things on your own. And these slides with those links, that's the important point. When I show you links up here, don't worry about feverishly writing them down. You can go to the website, arehart.org/presentations, and get the presentation already there today. And I'll just start by showing you, that's what it would look like, and it's right there at the top. So, and if you click on that link, you can get the slides. There's the PDF. And I did the version of this talk back in the CF Summit East in April, and that was based on the pre-release. So you wouldn't want to look at that one. This is based on the final release. And I believe, these are being recorded. That's what the camera back there in the back is. And so when these are recorded and I get the link, I'll put that up there on the website as well. We'll see how that goes. So for those who don't know me, I focus on server troubleshooting, mostly CF as well as Lucy. I'm an independent consultant, don't work for anybody, work with lots of people, including organizations of all sizes and experience levels. And I do, of course, remotely work, which I've always been, so that experience wasn't that different for me. I just stayed at home and did what I did, constantly working. And if you don't use somebody to help you like that remotely, it's safe, it's secure, it's easy. We do a very shared desktop. And I solve most problems that people present me in less than an hour, so just don't struggle with stuff. My goal is not just to fix it, but to teach you as we go so that you understand the problem. And if you don't feel that the time we spend together is valuable, then you won't pay for it. So just reach out and let me help if I can. That's my goal. That's what I do. And you can learn more about my rates and approach at that arehart.org consulting page. And I'm not selling anything. I'm just here talking about CF 2023. That's what I do in every release. So I want to repeat, the docs for CF 2023, there are many of them. They're substantial, and they have lots of sample code. So I'll be pointing you to that and showing you some of that, again, just briefly. And then Adobe had blog posts on the day of the release where they also highlighted some things. So there's resources that point to those. And I'll tell you that first, Adobe came out with a What's New article, and I want to show you that because it could be valuable to know about that. So check that out. It just goes on with feature after feature after feature and links And each of those links is a link to more and more about those features. And some of them have features within them, so that list may not have looked very big, but we'll see. There's more. And then they came out with a blog post the day it was released, and it pointed to some of these releases, docs and resources. And then I also that day came out with a blog post pointing to things and sharing some other perspectives and information, so check those out. All right, so let's drill in. So developer features. First up, if you hadn't heard about it, GraphQL support is added in CF 2023, and that's probably one of the biggest things that are, from a developer perspective, going to be interesting. It'll take time for it to, people to grok it and understand it. It's a query language to access data from APIs, and it's widely supported outside of the CF world, so this would be your entree into that world. And I just want to point out, because again, we don't have time to get into everything. I'm not doing the talk for Adobe on everything that's new. That would have been a great stuff they could have shown in a keynote, but I want to at least point you to the resources. This is the doc page that I just told you about. What I want you to see is that it's got a lot of stuff. What is it? How does it differ from REST? When should you use it? How do you go about using it? So lots of information, and that's 37 pages if printed. I'll just do I believe that, if it comes up. I don't know why that's so slow, but yeah, 37 pages, so it's substantial. I just want to say it's substantial, so definitely check it out. There you go. And it's got sample code, and that's the point I want to just repeat, because I'm sure some people, I want to see examples of it. You don't need me to show it. I don't need to show it here. You can go check out the docs and see it there, because we got to move on. There are new functions related to it in CFML functions, so these two are related to that. And again, don't have time to demo it, so just going to show it to you. And some along the way, I'll give you some extra points that may not be obvious. For instance, some people would order, hey, I want to serve my APIs via GraphQL. Well, they say they're planning for that in CF 2025. And they said that back in like April or something. And then this last couple of weeks, they announced that they're going to yearly releases. So there is seemingly going to be a CF 2024. So maybe this will come out in CF 2024 now that they've announced that. We'll see. Okay, next major feature, mostly from a developer perspective of interest, is Google Cloud Platform Integration, or GCP, and it expands on what had been added in CF 2021 of AWS and Azure integration. So if you hadn't seen that, you'll maybe not appreciate what this is about, but if you did see it and you went, that's a bummer, I don't use AWS or Azure, I use GCP. Well, everything that they did, conceptually to integrate AWS and Azure services, they've now done with GCP. And again, see the docs with a lot more examples. And if you're interested in exploring it, Google does offer a free tier of service for you to start playing with, using it, exploring it. And the first major thing, not in any particular order, but what they list is Firestore. And Firestore is a cloud implementation of Firebase NoSQL document database. And there's a whole page of stuff about that. And I just want to stress again, don't worry that you might go, what is that? How do I use it? It looks like somehow I don't have that page, but there it is right there. They're just there on the left. So that's the substantial docs about that, and with examples of how to integrate with it. So again, I'll leave you to look into that. How to set up the admin, how to set up your application CFC, how to call upon things. So check that out. Then they've opened up cloud storage APIs. So this is similar to what they long had done with S3. They did even more in CF 2021 with S3, so that has changed if you didn't know in 2021. And then they added Azure Blob Storage. Now they've added GCP's cloud storage. And there's a whole page on that, and I'll just leave it at that. Say if you're interested in that, there's a whole page on that with examples. And then they have their publishing subscription messaging service, PubSub. And they had done that in CF 2021 with AWS's SQS and Azure's Service Bus. So again, it's just rounding out that capability to work with all three of the major cloud vendors and to do it directly from within CFML in easy ways that's in the admin and in CFML language. Of course, you could have hacked all these things with CF HTTP and other approaches, but it's just more directly integrated. So if that interests you, go check it out. That's what those features are about. This might rock some boats more. They've replaced the PDF engine that underlies producing PDFs in CF if you use CF HTML to PDF. So if you use the old CF document, that's not changed. In CF11, they'd added CF HTML to PDF, and it's a different, different tag, and it used a different engine than the CF document did. So from CF11 until CF 2021, it was a WebKit-based thing. I forget what it was under the covers in detail, but what is it now? Well, now what they've done is they've licensed a PDF generating engine. And again, the key is that it generates PDF from HTML. And you might say, well, why wouldn't they just integrate something of their own? I don't know. Maybe they don't have anything that does that very well. So they licensed this PDF reactor, and there's the website. You can go check it out yourself. They've licensed it, so you could pay a lot of money to them, or you can just use CF 2023, and it's built in. And the cool thing is that it supports much more, modern HTML and CSS and JavaScript, things that were previously tripping up the PDFs people would generate with CF HTML to PDF since CF11. And it was supposed to be better than the one from CF document, right? So if you've had bad experiences producing PDFs from CF, CFML and HTML, check out the new engine, and it's just using the CF HTML to PDF tag. Pretty straightforward. And it's enabled by default. You don't even have to turn it on. They like it so much, they said, we're going that way. We're using that new engine. And I'll show you in a bit what the admin looks like for that. Also, some of you may be interested to know that there's a new conformance attribute when you produce these PDFs, and it can be things like PDF A1A and A1B and all these things, which are part of an ISO specification for long-term document archival. That's what it's there for, and CF now supports that. And there's a whole page on that, and I'll just leave it at that. You can check it out. When this stuff came out first back in CF11, there was some problem where it wasn't on some OSs and it was on others. Well, this has been all on Windows, Linux, Mac OS, and Solaris. Those are the 4 OSs that CF supports. And we'll talk more about the specific versions that CF 2023 supports later on. Sticking with the developer features for now, the next major section of capabilities was JSON Web Tokens, JWTs. So now CFML in ColdFusion has direct support for creating and issuing JWTs and verifying them if they're issued by other apps and APIs. So again, there's a whole doc page on it, lots of examples on it. I'll leave you to explore that. One thing I will say, in case you go look at it, you could be left thinking, no, there's not any documentation on that. So here's the page on it, and as you page down, you go, there's no examples there. That's just bullet points. What? But if you look here, these are the links to the function. So if you want to create a JWT, and it can be either signed or encrypted, then there's the specific doc page on that function. And at the bottom of that page, it has examples of doing that. So nice to see them offering lots of examples right out of the box. And it does support signatures and encryption, Java web encryption. And they also support things that if you've worked with this, they support claims and headers and payloads. So it's really pretty well-featured set if you're into working with JWTs. And the new functions are, again, those guys, and verify those guys. Next, some of you might go, wait, what? Avro and Protobuf and others are going to, oh, wow, cool. ColdFusion's going to support those? So these are standards for schema-based serialization instead of traditional old JSON serialization that we've been using for years. These are schema-based serialization. So Avro was developed originally by Hadoop for the big data project, and then Protobuf was developed, or protocol buffers, was developed originally by Google. And so, like so many things in our IT world, they're competing with each other about who's going to become the big kahuna. Anyway, so CFML supports both, and they both support simple and complex data types. And if you see the docs, they give you examples of working with those things. They talk about them. They talk about the pros and cons of comparing it with traditional serialization approaches. So again, just go check out the docs if that interests you. You know, it's probably one of those things that some people will go to immediately. Others are going to ignore it. And maybe a year or two from now, you'll start hearing about it, and you'll remember, oh yeah, ColdFusion can do that. And you'll check it out, and there it will be, ready for you to work with it. And so it's got new functions for serialize and deserialize Avro or Protobuf. So I'll leave you to look into those. And the new GCP pub sub feature can leverage this capability especially. So again, check all that stuff out. A couple other things. Here's where you get into the hidden gems, some things I discovered. The CF image and the image functions, CF image tag and image functions, support new formats that might interest some people, JPEG 2000, PNM, and RAW. May not matter to many, but there you go. And these are what his been supported, several different formats, and there certainly are others they could add. And I know Lucy announced recently they'd added some more. So it's back and forth as they all debate what's the right thing to support. And the way to find out what CF supports, there's a couple of functions called get readable image formats and get writable image formats, and I just ran those and compared 2021 to 2023 and saw those differences. I also found some new functions in CFML 2023, XML clear, delete at, has child, and update functions. And I found these by comparing the ColdFusion get function list. Some people don't know that there is such a thing, get function list. You've used that once or twice, haven't you, Ben? So yeah, it's a great way to see what's possible. And you might be shocked, because you can look through the docs, but sometimes you're just looking to see what's different. Well, I just compared the results of these between 2021 and 2023 and found these. Among others, there were others that are documented. These I've not found a document anywhere discussing them. But anyway, moving on. There's also some bug fixes to be aware of. And if Brad were here, and I'll say this as Luis walks in the door, if Brad were here, he'd be excited to hear this, that you can now chain struct and array literals. He had raised this back in 2014 as a bug, and it's finally been fixed. It hadn't worked, but now it does. So he gave an example in the bug fix, and it now works, or in the bug report. So again, you could chain things together. So I'll leave you to explore that if that interests you. There was a bug with the query filter function where its argument didn't work, and that's been fixed. I'm just pointing out a couple things that some people might go, oh, that's great, I've suffered that. There's a bunch of other fixes, and they don't seem to be as wide impact, and so I'll just point you to the docs page. There is a docs page that lists the bugs fixed, and it's a section of that page, and that's an anchor to that section of that page. All right, moving on now to the installation, deployment, administration, configuration side of the house. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and just get right to them. So first, if you hadn't heard about it, is a new thing they're calling CCS, or Central Configuration Service, CCS. So it's an optional feature. You don't have to use it. And if you do it for one or more CF instances, you can identify them as a group of instances, and you can identify what kind of environment there may need to be, like these are my test servers, these are my production servers. And once you've identified them and linked them together to this thing, then any changes that are made to any instance in the group are stored centrally and propagated to all the instances in that group and in that environment. So it's pretty cool capability. And this is whether you make the change in the admin, or you use the admin API, or use the new CF setup CLI tool. So in CF 2021, there's a new CF setup CLI tool. If you're familiar with CF config, you would probably use that. But if you're not, if you don't use command box, CF setup is built into CF 2021, and it's now there also in 2023. And I'm saying you can make changes to the admin via the CLI, via the API, or through the admin. And with this CCS, whatever way you make the change gets propagated, first up to the central store and then down to all the participating instances. And you can do it based on environment. So we're making changes in test and deploying them to all the test ones, and then say, let's go from test to production. That's built into the way the CCS works. And it audits and monitors all the changes. It tracks the version history, and this is where it gets interesting, and supports rollback. There are some settings that are not currently synced, and I don't know if this will change in time, but it's documented. They say they don't do data sources, they don't do Java, JVM settings, they don't do scheduled tasks, and they don't do settings that involve paths and passwords. And you might think, well, what the hell has left? But trust me, there's dozens of things that are left. There's a lot of settings in the admin that aren't of those natures, and those things are. And you can imagine that part of the reason why they don't is that some of those have things that are going to be specific to the machine, and if they just go passing them to the other machine, they won't work, So anyway, that sort of thing, it's a new feature, brand new, just came out with 2023. It'll probably evolve, and people will complain and argue and debate, and it'll sort out, and things will end up the way hopefully it needs to be. Well, there's an entire doc page on it, and I'll leave you to look into that. It has images of the screenshots of the admin and things like that. And I just want to say a couple things about it. You started as a command line tool, CCS. It's a batch file or SH from the ColdFusion CFusion bin, or some instance bin of some server that you, or instance that you declare to be, this is where I'm going to run it from. So that takes a little getting in your head. So you run this command line, and you can say start server, and it starts this thing up. And then instances can be configured to act as clients to that. and you can do that configuration of instances either as an auto discovery feature from the central server that can reach out and find by a multicast what servers are out there and bring them in, or you can add them manually in the admin of that server on which you started the CCS, or in that CCS CLI, there's ways to add servers. And you might say, wait a minute, you can't just go add servers. No, you have to have, there's a client secret for each instance, and you would need to provide that secret to be able to add it to that central store. And in the CF admin, there's sections in the admin there's a new page for the CCS, and there's a server section that discusses things like what instances have been added and managing that. And there's this client section that details whether this instance is in the CCS or not. And then there's also version history, literally showing the admin changes that are tracked. And I want to say again that you might even consider using this for a single instance, just to be able to track changes to your admin. And some will go, wait, the audit log is there. That's always been there since CF10. Yes, but that's just a log. This is literally tracking the changes, saving copies of them. You might go, wait, how does that work? Let me just tell you, because I found this pretty interesting. So in the server instance where you start the CCS, it'll have a CCS store folder created in its bin folder. It's kind of weird. You just got to find it. It's in the bin folder, and it's documented. And in that folder, they'll create a folder that defines the cluster and the environment. And then in that, it'll have folder names with increasing numbers, and each increasing number holds the changes that were made for that particular change. And it's any changes that were made. So any Neo XML file that was changed, they'll literally have a copy of the Neo XML file that was, and then the change. And they even have a JSON file that specifically tracks what was changed in that file. It's called changes.txt, which is kind of too bad because you wouldn't think that was a JSON file. But anyway, it is, and you could look at that. And I'm sure there'll be, over time, tools people will come up with to help visually manage it, and they'll probably add some capability in the future. And then also on that server, there's a lib CCS folder. So in the CFusion lib, for example, there'd be a CCS folder, and it has the server's properties of what that server is going to listen on and what environments it will support that people can join to. And then it keeps track of what nodes are currently using that central configuration. And then on the client's instances, there's a lib CCS folder which points to the server. So it's just all stuff pointing from one server to another to be the central. And on that one in the client, you can even tell it to not monitor changes to something. There's an exclude files property that you can say, don't sync that stuff. So it's pretty well thought out. Again, time will tell. There'll be pros and cons to working with it, so check it out. I thought it was pretty interesting and worthy of a couple extra minutes of discussion. And again, remember when I first put the talk together, this is where I was going to do this kind of stuff, and then without the keynote, I thought I better throw in some of that other stuff for you guys. Now, I keep looking at my clock there, and it says 21 minutes. Now I didn't pay attention to the time. What is that, about 20 minutes that we have left? Anybody? What time we're due to stop? Perfect. Okay, there you go. It is accurate. Okay, cool. Got this old school kitchen timer, but it works well. But I hadn't used it in a while. I thought, oh, maybe the battery's low and it's not working well. Excellent. All right, so next up, this is kind of interesting to some people. Again, not to others. I put the developer stuff up first. Others will find this perhaps more interesting than even some of that developer stuff. You ever notice that within the CF admin, for most people, they just use one username, admin, and everybody has the password. Well, that's not the only way it worked. You can also define different users, and that's not new. You've been able to define different users, but it would be in the admin. Somebody would define a user called Bob and say Bob has access to the admin, and here's Bob's password. Yeah, you could do that. And you can even say, and Sally has access to and she has access to the data sources. Bob has access to the schedule tasks. Yeah, there's that capability. That's not new. I'll show you later a link to an article I did 13, 14 years ago. That capability is not new. But you had to go into the admin to define that user and password. And some people said, hang on, why are we doing that? I've got a single sign-on mechanism that's got username and passwords, or I've got an LDAP that's got can I just use those? And no, you never could until now in CF 2023. You can. So it's in the CF admin, in the security, on the administrator page. If you'd say, I want to use a separate username and password, that's always been there. Most people never picked it. They just left it as one username. But if you said this, then now there's a new feature called external authentication. It's grayed out until you pick this option that says separate username and password. But yeah, once you do that, then you can go to the user manager, because in the admin there is a page called user manager, and you can choose external user and then name the LDAP or SAML resource that holds the usernames and passwords, and you could define what the user is and what their privileges are. Yeah, pretty cool. Now you do have to have that SAML or LDAP resource configured, and from CF 2021, there's a page for doing that, for setting CF to be an IDP or an SP, for those that are familiar with that. So you do have to have that stuff configured. And here's a whole page on it with, again, screenshots showing the admin, showing what you need to do. It's a really cool feature. And I just wanted to add some things that maybe wouldn't be obvious. I have not found it to apply to RDS logins. If you know what that is, if you don't worry about it. But it doesn't apply to that. And I just repeat, this capability of multiple users has been there for decades. And I did this article in 2009 on it. And there's the link. And it's a web archive link because it was on the old Adobe DevNet that's no longer even there. And I should redo it and make it modern. But I've looked at it. The concept and the features and the screens, it's really not that different. So if you're interested in this subject broadly, check that out. And then the specifics of the new LDAP and SSO capability is what's new. And it can be controlled via that CF setup or the admin API as well. So if you want to script this stuff, you can. You don't have to do everything in the admin. You can do stuff entirely scripted. And so see the docs for details on how to do that. It literally specifies what are the CF setup commands to do this and what are the admin API methods to call that. And I'll talk a bit about that CF setup a little bit more in a moment. Rounding out the CF admin stuff, there is now new capability. If you're going to use Redis as your cache, I think that's enterprise only, yeah. So if you have CF Enterprise, you can now point to alternative caching engines, and that was added in CF 2021. And in 2018, and was expanded in 2021. Well, now you can make that be SS enabled for Redis, which is nice for some people. Excuse me. And that I was just pointing out that in the admin, there's a whole new page related to the GC or sections of the GCP capabilities. And the PDF engine is on the data and services page called PDF service, and it's just got a drop down for the version, and it defaults again to 2.0, and you can change it. And there's some other bugs related to admin installation configuration, and on that, here's that link to the bug fixes. I'm just saying check that out, because if you're into administering or managing CF, you might see some things that are of interest to you. There's also a known issues section of that page, and most of them are related to this admin stuff, not developer stuff, so I didn't mention that earlier. But check out that known issues section of that doc page. As far as installing CF 2023, I want to say a few things. First of all, for those that use command box, this is all you need to hear. You can say Adobe at 2023. And then as there's updates, there'll be variants of that. And for you, that's enough. But for others, if you want to do a full GUI installer, you can do that. If you want to do silent install, you can do that. And there's a whole page discussing that. In CF 2021, they added a new zip install approach, where you just download the zip and extract it, and it's there. And that's also got a silent install, because there's one little extra command script that you have to run that do things like accept the license agreement and a couple of other things that they just don't avoid you doing. But there's a silent install for that. And there's a doc page on that. And then there's a WAR deployment, JEE WAR deployment. CF has long supported that, and that's available as well. And that's not all. There's Docker containers and images for CF 2023, as there were for 2021 and 2018 and even 2016. A lot of people didn't know that these were around. And I've done talks on it in the 4 years since the last CFCamp. I had done a couple different talks at CF Summit and some of the other events, and they're available on my website at the presentations section. Just search for Docker. And I not only did discussions of the Adobe CF images, but even at last year's Into the Box, I did a talk comparing the command box images for CF and Lucy to the Adobe CF images and the Lucy CF images. So if you're interested in distinctions among them and the pros and cons and the features that each has, and they all just have different ways of doing things that are perhaps of value one way or the other, check that out. But anyway, moving on, I'm saying the CF 2023, you can deploy it as an image. And there's this whole doc page that some people never even know it exists. So if you've never run CF images or CF as Docker containers or in Kubernetes, that discusses how to use them. And they refer to them as Docker images, but they're more broadly just images. And I did a talk, here's that link to that talk. Sorry, no, this is a different talk on how the images have evolved in CF. The Adobe CF images, I did a talk on how those had evolved. And I've not found any new configuration options in the 2023 images. So they didn't change other than they are now 2023. And then if you're into working with Azure VM images, those are available for CF 2023 already. And if you go to the Azure Marketplace, you'll see them there and you can pick them and choose them and see the pricing and all that stuff. And they're available for Windows and Red Hat and Ubuntu and Alma Linux. And then the AWS AMIs that have existed for a long time, they don't yet, as of a test yesterday, I checked again, they're still not there for CF 2023. So the vendor that's behind those, I believe it's Coalesce, for some reason they just haven't gotten them out there yet, but we can expect that soon. And this is how you could search for it if you haven't gone there to look for it. The performance monitoring tool set, that was added in CF 2018, and it works with 2018 and 2021 and 2023. The PMT is what it's called. If you don't know about it, again, here's a substantial part of the docs to understand how the PMT works. And it's changed in 2023. I just wanted to point it out. They've upgraded its underlying Elasticsearch engine. So its data store is an Elasticsearch that Adobe includes in there. And that's interesting to note that if you implement the PMT and you want to use it as a cache from CF, you can, you've got it. And it's even a Windows install of Elastic, which is kind of hard to come by. So anyway, that's nice that that's there. And the change from Elastic 5 to 8 is a nice benefit because it takes up less space and has improved performance. And actually, I realized I just said what I said about not having the Windows install. That may be the data store that underlies the API manager. What's that other one? Redis. Yeah, that's Redis, and that's hard to come by a Windows deployment. But anyway, that API manager has a Redis deployment under it, and that you can leverage that from within CF for the features that leverage Redis. So anyway, moving on. The new PMT supports monitoring that GCP stuff, so that's a change in that. And it supports SSL, TLS authentication to that Elasticsearch data store, which is very important for some people, so they added that. And here's a whole doc page on that subject, as well as these other couple of subjects up above. Okay, and then as far as the admin, and so far as bugs fixed, and these are some things I want to regard as hidden gems. I don't know if they're bug fixes or if they're changes. If you had noticed that the ability to look at the logs in the ColdFusion Administrator, that had been taken away in CF 2021 and 2018 as of an update last year, and it was never explained why. They just took it away. If you go to the admin of 2021 or 2018 of a recent version update, you can't look at the logs from within there. And some people, I don't ever look at them. I look at the whatever, they either from their development environment or from the command console or the file system. But some people really liked looking at logs from within the admin. They took that away. Well, it's back. And again, no explanation. It's back. And just want to say, yay, it's back for those who want to leverage that. Also, here's a big yay. If you use CF on Windows and use the Windows installer, I don't know if you ever noticed it, but whenever you installed it, the start menu was only for you, not for everybody on the machine. So I would work with people where one person installed it and another person is looking at it and they're trying to find how to run the web server configuration tool, and they're looking at the start menu for Adobe and there's no ColdFusion, there's no Adobe. Well, it's because it installed only for the person who installed it. It put the start menu only for the person who installed it. So again, that's a little thing, but they fixed it, and that's, to me, a hidden gem for you on Windows. Also, if you've worked on 2021 or 2018 with the PDF service, the add-on service, you've sometimes found that if you restarted the add-on service, then suddenly the PDF generation capability would fail, simply because you restarted the add-on service that processes the PDFs. That was stupid. Well, they fixed that in 2023. That no longer happens, and I hope they'll backport that to 2021 and 2018. And I'll do a blog post on it for those that are on those earlier versions, because I did find a way to fix it, you know, as a workaround until then. And if you're interested, just catch up with me later and we'll talk about it. There's some other bug fixes, again, mentioned in that bug fixes doc. I'll leave it at that. Before leaving the subject of CF 2023, I just want to say a bunch of things that were new in 2021 that might be really important for you to understand. 2021 made CF modular, just like Lucy's modular. And so it starts out a 150 meg core engine. So CF can be downloaded as little as 150 meg. And then it can have modules, or they call them extensions in Lucy, added to it. And there's a tool called CFPM in ColdFusion 2021. CFPM can add or remove packages. And that's, there's even also in the admin, if you can get into the admin, and by default the core engine has the admin package, you can remove it, but it has it, and you can use the admin's interface. And there's Docker environment variables if you use the Docker images to add and remove packages. So it's a very complete implementation of that sort of modular deployment of the CFML engine, and you can read all about it at this doc page, because it's not new in 2023. You might have missed it if you're skipping 2021 or didn't pay attention. And I mentioned that CF setup tool. It's a command line tool, and granted, CF config, we talked about that earlier, is much more powerful, very capable, works with both Lucy and CF, but Adobe added in CF 2021 a CF setup tool, and it's in a config folder. So it's in, I believe it's, I can't remember which folder it was within. The config, right. So you have ColdFusion CFusion stuff, and then you have ColdFusion config, WS config. It's in that config folder, which was kind of weird. But anyway, you can use it to manage settings. And I did a whole talk on it about how you can export to JSON and import from JSON, can use it in containers or not. And there's a full doc page on it. And then here's that presentation I did, a whole hour on the CF setup tool. And then if you didn't know, CF 2021, they had added activation, so you can't just drop in a license and hey, it works. That's the way it was for years, but not anymore. Now it does activation to a server at Adobe, and it has support for offline use if you're in an air-gapped server. So anyway, that's all discussed in detail in that doc page. Wrapping up this Hidden Gems talk, few areas remain, and I'll just again skip right to them instead of bullet pointing them. So I mentioned that it's updated to support Java 17. Specifically, it comes with 1706. The latest is 1707. Oh well, they'll get that updated eventually. And 2021 and 2018 ran on Java 11. CF 2016 ran on Java 8 and later on 11. But even though Java 17 came out in 2021, neither 2021 or 2018 have supported or probably will support Java 17. Maybe a future update will bring it to 2021. CF 2018 ends in July. You know, the support for it ends in the last updates for 2018 will come 5 years after it came out. That's in July, and that's all documented. As far as Java 17 changes are concerned, I just want to point out, if you're looking into it, don't just look at what changed in 17, look at what changed in 16, 15, 14, 13, and 12. Java has had that many updates. They went to such very frequent, every 6-month updates, and then they declare certain ones to be long-term support. 11 is a long-term support, 17 is a long-term support, 21 will be the next long-term support, 8 is still a long-term support. Anyway, CF 2023 will work with 17. And so look at what changed in all those versions. And don't confuse those version numbers with the Java 11 version numbers, like there's 11.018 and 11.017. Got 5 minutes left. And we could probably go a couple minutes long, right, because we got lunch right afterwards. But anyway, most JVM changes in Java 17 and the others between that and 11 really only benefit Java developers who are going to be writing code. And maybe those will be leveraged by Adobe in some ways that'll benefit us. And you can leverage Java yourself today in ColdFusion with create object and CF object. And if you didn't know, CF 2021 added a CF Java. So you can put Java code in CFML, so you could call it a Java island. You could do that in CF 2021. Anyway, so you could leverage this stuff if you want to, but I just want to talk about a couple things that'll benefit us even if we don't do Java. Just so you're aware, if you use the CMS or conc mark sweep garbage collection algorithm, it's gone as of Java 14. Now, it didn't affect us on CF 2018 and 2021 because they were on Java 11. But now 2023 is on Java 17. If you use CMS, it won't work. So you got to change to another GC algorithm. And besides, you know, the ones that, like Adobe uses the parallel GC. Some people prefer, what's the other one? The current other default. Yeah, I was going to say Java 1, but it's not Java 1. G1, the G1 GC. If you don't specify any, you get G1. Adobe's always specified the parallel GC, and they still do in 2023. They just think that that's good for CF. But I wanted to add that there's been new GCs since then. ZGC and Shenandoah added in 14 and 15, or production ready as of 14 and 15. So those are choices you could consider. That's where we go. There you go. I knew I had it. So there you go. And then also Java 17 added, and other earlier versions added a thing called Class Data Sharing Archives, CDS, and that will be interesting potential impact for us. And null pointers have much more useful error messages, which could benefit us, although I don't see too many null pointers anymore. And then you may hear people say that the security manager, the Java security manager has been removed, but it's not been removed, it's been deprecated, and they're wanting to remove it. Well, I point that out because that's used by the ColdFusion Security Sandbox. If you use the CF Security Sandbox, that leverages the security manager, and if Java ultimately removes it, that will impact your ability. And I haven't heard Adobe talking about it. If you're interested in that, I'm just pointing it out. Be aware of this. You should look into that. Tomcat was updated finally to 9072. That's pretty recent. The latest is 9076. That's not so bad. Unfortunately, CF 2021 is still running on 9060, and a lot of people are unhappy about that. It hasn't changed since May of last year, and let's hope that they'll come out with an update that will fix that. As far as deprecations are concerned, there's a deprecated features page for CF, and I didn't see anything on it talking about 2023. If you're coming from 2018 or earlier, just remember you got to look at what changed in 2021, or if you're coming from 2016, what changed in 2018 and 2021, so that's on you. And just go to that deprecated features page, you can read all about what's changed. As far as compatibility and migration, I've not really seen any big complaints of anybody saying they're having trouble going from 2021 to 2023. Now, if you again are going from 2018, well then you should look at what changed in 2021. And if you're coming from 2016, you should look at what changed in 2018. And you have to consider all those things. And I've discussed those in my hidden gems in the past. So there's none to talk about for this one, but when I did hidden gems in 2021, I talked about how it had changed from 2018. When I talked about hidden gems in 2018, I talked about how it changed from 2016. So you could look at those talks. And then I finally did a talk that I just 2 years ago called Migrating Apps to 2021 from Earlier Versions. And I gathered all that up into one presentation. So I would argue if you're moving to 2023 from any earlier version, go watch this talk, and I could update it. But again, there's nothing for now that's a change. I also did talks in the past like what was new in CF 10, 11, and 2016 that you might have missed. So I understand people are busy, they're not paying attention. You guys are learning about what's 2023 today. 90% of people that use CF are not hearing what's new. They won't think about it for a year or two. So these talks are there to help them down the road. I also did one on migrating and comparing admin settings between versions, which could be useful. So again, check out the presentations section. Here's that list of the version numbers of the underlying libraries. They're all Java libraries. And I've bolded the ones that are new and different. If you care about that stuff, come get the slide. You can see that for yourself. We'll go ahead and move on. Quickly about database version support and OS and stuff like that, I'll just tell you, they've dropped some older databases, but you may find they still work. So let's talk about it. They formally only support SQL Server 2022 and 2019. And you might be on 2016 or 2012 or 2008. Well, you may find it works just fine. So just be aware, they're just saying they don't formally support anything but these. So it's just, think about it. 2019 is 4 years ago. It's really not so bad for them to say, come on, can't you be on a database that's less than 4 years old? But I understand, I know a lot of people run on very old database servers. MySQL 8, they dropped 5. Yeah, it's time to get off of 5. And not just CF, but lots of other things are saying get off of MySQL 5. Postgres 14. Derby, who cares, for most people, 10.11. And if you use CF Enterprise, it supports DB2 version 11 and Oracle version 19c, LTS. And this is all discussed, mentioned on the support matrix. So again, you could have looked at this, but I'm just letting you know because often people don't look at these pages. And it also lists the database as a service options and the version numbers they support on Azure and AWS and GCP. As far as OSs are concerned, they support Windows Server 2022, 2019, and 2016, so no longer 2012. Time to get off. It's 11 years old. Come on. And Windows 11 and 10, Home, Pro, and Enterprise. Mac OS, it is at least Ventura, and supports ARM64, yes. M1. Now, I will throw out, they have in the release notes a notification that, hey, if you run the DMG, the installer DMG, you should run this XATTR-RC against it before. Some people would know that from other things they've installed. Adobe's pointing out you need that for the CF installer. If you use the zip install, you don't need to use an installer. You just extract the zip. So anyway, moving on. Red Hat 9.1, Ubuntu 2022, and SUSE 15.3, and Solaris 11.4. They also support IIS 10 and Apache 2.4 and the various versions of Java app servers. They just spell all this out for those who need to know that. Most of you don't need to. As far as pricing hasn't changed. It's the same as 2021. That's good. I didn't see any differences between standard and enterprise. No changes in that regard. The EULA is in the license.html file in the root of your ColdFusion directory. If you didn't know that, you can read the EULA yourself, and I read it, and the only significant change I found was their definition of the computer. In 2021, it was this verbiage. In 2023, it's this slightly different italicized stuff, not really that significant, but the bolded part is it says where a device contains more than one virtual environment, including VMs or virtual processors, each virtual environment is counted as a separate computer. So their licensing is per computer, per server, so they're distinguishing how they handle virtual machines. So that's perhaps a bummer for some people to hear, but I'll leave you to take that up with Adobe. I don't work for Adobe, I'm just the messenger. And then this is good news, the backup and disaster recovery section now covers failover. So it's backup, failover, and disaster recovery. And it says you can use a license that you pay for to use for these other purposes as well. And it discusses that, and I'll leave you to read the EULA for that. End of life, like I said, things do eventually end after 5 years. 2023 is in May of 2028, so we got 5 years on that. 2021 is in November 2025. It came out in November 2020, so we have 3 years left on that. 2018 ends next month, 16 ended in 2021, and so on and so on. And this is documented, if you didn't know it. There's a page that explains that. And I did a blog post warning people, hey, if you're on 2018, get off of it. And then lastly, CF Builder, I mentioned, they came out with a VS Code extension for CF Builder. So the old CF Builder based on Eclipse is still there, but it's not being updated, and you should move off of it and get to VS Code like everybody else in the IT world. Everybody's on VS Code for the most part, and Adobe jumped on that ship and came out with a free VS Code extension. And it's in the extensions marketplace. Just call it Adobe ColdFusion Builder or type CFML or ColdFusion in a search in the code and you'll find it. And it's been updated to support 2023 with new tags and function statements and stuff like that. And it's updatable within the VS Code extensions pane. And the current version is that particular number if you're curious. And there's a bug fix about it if you'd used the old one. It came out last summer, and when you would set up projects and then close and reopen VS Code, the projects were gone in certain situations, and that's been fixed. I've not noticed any other significant changes about it. But don't miss that it does a lot. I mean, that's the thing. CF Builder in the old version and in this new version does a lot that many people never explore. They just see it as a code editor, highlighting syntax, and no, it's much, much more. It's an IDE. You could have it integrated with your local or remote server, and it can be showing your CFCs that are defined on that server, and it finds them automatically anywhere that CFCs can be found relative to that application. It's very powerful in much more ways than I'm even giving it credit right now. So if you haven't checked it out, look at the docs for it. There you go. And one thing I do want to say about the docs for that I noticed it's a bit of a frustration is if you go to that page, you're taken to this page, which, it's got a lot of stuff on it. It's about 10 pages if you printed it. But that's not all. I'm going to hit the back button and show you where I got to that. On some of the CF docs pages, when you look over here on the left side of the screen, there's other sections. And this is covered in this whole section called Adobe ColdFusion Builder Extension for VS Code. And that was that. And then there's this, and there's this, and there's this, and there's this. And if you don't know that, if you just see that one page, you go, doesn't interest me, doesn't impress me. I can't figure out how to use it. And then you look over and you go, whoa, there's like 50 pages of docs. I just didn't even know they were there. So I want to recommend strongly you look at those docs. All right, so lots of changes. Sorry, a couple minutes over. 6 minutes, I see. Apologize for that. Beyond just the major features that Adobe may highlight, and I hope you feel motivated and informed to consider CF 2023. And if you have any follow-up questions or comments or, again, feedback, I welcome it at all these means. And don't forget the slides are available at carehart.org/presentations. Thank you very much. Whew.